Welcome to the Humans Against Poor Scholarship Summer Grant Interviews. Each one of our interviewees is competing for a $2,000 grant to help fund their summer research. Do you want to have a say in who gets funded? Become a HAPS donor today by visiting www.hapsfund.com/donate.
Good afternoon, everybody, and contrary to the little introduction there, this is the second round of interviews, which means that the people we are talking to have received their scholarship money and have very kindly come back to tell us about how their summer went and how their research went. So joining me today is Ransom. Hello, thank you again for coming back.
Of course. Hi, Megan.
Could you, before we get started, just kind of reintroduce yourself for people who maybe didn't catch your interview the first time round, and describe what your area of interest is and what your summer project was?
Yeah, absolutely. So my project that I'm currently working on is my dissertation in Hebrew Bible. And the project is focused on the divine counsel in the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Near East, more broadly. And what that includes is it's a very kind of holistic comparative approach. So I really compare the divine counsel in the Old Testament to similar comparable divine counsel scenes as they appear in the literature of the ancient Near East. This includes uh, literatures of Anatolia, the Aegean, Homer, Egypt, and Mesopotamia for the most part, and then of course Canaan.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And what were you planning on doing over the summer then?
Yes. And so this summer, I really took on the Egyptian portion of the project. So there was I kind of made another foray into Egyptian literature, and one of the kind of methodological things that I've kind of been taking on is just really just one of the questions is, how is this a divine counsel or not? Is a divine counsel anytime gods are talking to each other or something like that? Well, not really. It's so the divine counsel is really an administrative kind of metaphor of divinity. And so a divine council is really just kind of a high ranking body of gods meeting together and making really um, important decisions with far reaching consequences for the cosmos and for the nation, that they're in charge of. And so one of the important tasks is just kind of finding certain terms that identify a divine council. And, when it's called or maybe an assembly of the gods of some sort. So this has been, an important way of just kind of delimiting um, the corpus and really just kind of honing in on what we can call a divine council in Egyptian literature. So we have a few words really that we just kind of focused in on. And so the earliest, let me slow down here for a second. Just really as soon as we have the earliest texts in Egyptian literature, have references, it seems, to an assembly of the gods of sorts. And this is really interesting. It seems to be the same case in Mesopotamian texts as well, which as soon as we have literature, there seem to be references to really in Mesopotamia, a Pukru assembly of the gods of sorts. And the same seems to be the case in Egypt as well. It seems that the oldest references are to a Het, this kind of assembly. There's this shows up in personal names and anyways in the pyramid texts. And yeah, it's just interesting, just as a kind of point of reference, that the kind of this kind of metaphor for divinity, um, you know, as far as we can trace it back in texts in literature, it really kind of goes past where we can see, really.
Mhm.
So the kind of dominant theory seems to be, this was formulated by an important scholar, surely, as you know, Megan, in Assyriology and Sumerology, Thorkel Jakobson. And yeah, it seems to say that this idea of this kind of administrative metaphor of divinity seems to come out of around the second half of the fourth century, just with the emergence of city states and just kind of an expansion of just like bureaucracy and city administration. And this kind of then becomes a sign for power, in the world. And, there's a kind of homology then between the city and the gods. This is a kind of thing that's even kind of, I think, difficult even for us to see because it's so close, really. Just like the idea of God and God's kingdom is just I don't know, it's so ubiquitous, it's difficult to even fathom it, or even just God, as this just a social metaphor, right? God, as a human being in a sense, is kind of just difficult for us to conceive just because it's so close. So it is just trying to find that distance in some way. But the interesting thing to observe about Egyptian contexts is that this seems to be the same case. As soon as we have opportunities to observe it there, it seems to be, yeah, it at some point, I guess, according to Jakobson, in the fourth century, we've got these big cities and city states forming, and yeah, it becomes such a powerful, I guess, symbol or just way of conceiving the divine world, according to a city, that just becomes so important. And the divine council, the assembly of the gods, is the highest authority in these
Mhm.
bodies. In Egyptian contexts, this seems to be one of the most important divine assemblies, perhaps more than anywhere. It seems like Egyptian contexts have kind of refer to multiple divine uh, collectives as divine assemblies. In other contexts, it seems like they seem to be a little bit more focused, but around a certain set of groups. Anyways, yeah, Egyptian contexts seem to be a little more comfortable with referring to multiple collectives as assemblies of the gods. But in any case, the most important of these, anyone familiar with Egyptian religion will certainly know the kind of Heliopolitan Ennead. The Ennead is seems to be a group of nine gods. We'll return to that literal nine here in a second, but yeah, yeah. So it's there seems to be maybe some kind of mystical or numerological significance of nine gods. People seem to think, it relates to three. Three is the basic kind of unit of plural in Egyptian, and it's three times three. So maybe it's like a super plural. In which case, so it is interesting here at certain points, the Ennead is kind of coterminous with all the gods, right? In this case. And so in that sense, it does seem to suggest a little bit that, you know, maybe three times three is a kind of complex plural or something, or a super complete plural or something like that. Well, maybe. Certainly in Mesopotamian contexts, the assembly of the gods is the same, is used at least rhetorically in this way, that the divine assembly is representative of all the gods, or maybe it's supposed to represent at least all the relevant benign divine powers in the cosmos. So, I don't know if we have to attribute that in Egyptian contexts to, some kind of numerological significance. In any case, it's nine. Nine, though, probably you seem to already kind of be aware, like, uh, this body isn't always nine. It's not always the same nine. Sometimes it's 12. Sometimes it's, yeah, there are clearly groups called Enneads. Or yeah, there are clearly these groups called Enneads, this Pesjet, that are, and then it lists like 12, or it lists like
Demonstrably not 9.
Yeah, exactly. So there's yeah, I mean, well, also another kind of interesting thing about this is like, okay, well, and then the most traditional nine is not, it's also not grouped by threes, right? Like it's definitely grouped in terms of pairs. Again, like the grouping is kind of by kind of social, it's again social metaphor. And you have basically pairs, male, female, um, a husband consort, a husband wife pairs, and out of them they kind of beget other kind of things. So maybe it's maybe we're supposed to find significance in three, maybe not. But yeah. So, but three does kind of continue to pop up in one way or another. Um, yeah, let me find where. Let me remember where I was here for a second.
That was really interesting. I did want to ask, do you see, and again, I think we said this over the summer, you haven't finished your research yet, but do you get a sense that the divine councils through these different cultures are having the same function, or do they have more variety in what they're doing?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think this is one of the kind of more important kind of things that I'm taking on a little bit. Is there's just a little bit of there's a lot of kind of confusion, I think, about what this is, and certainly in, perhaps most of all, in biblical studies, where so one of the things that I did this summer is kind of collect some references by scholars who are doing specifically comparative work, who kind of just rehearse certain claims in one way or another about why specifically Egyptian contexts are null, or they're kind of they're unnecessary for comparison, or inappropriate, or whatever, not valuable for comparison. This is very interesting, and there are a half a dozen kind of important publications on the Divine Council that kind of that dismiss Egyptian comparison without justification. Um, and so I think this this is worth kind of thinking about on one level. There's a kind of there's a certain kind of maybe there's a monotheism, polytheism kind of maybe phobia happening there. Maybe a desire to kind of uphold a certain amount of difference. Maybe there's some kind of confessional claims that are, confessional issues maybe that are kind of wrapped up in this, that are worth thinking about. But yeah, in terms of what the divine counsel is, um, I mean, I think it's part of a much larger, I think, worldview, or we have all kinds of fancy words for talking about this kind of thing, but it's definitely a more kind of cohesive paradigm of the world, right? Um, that that it's really like a hermeneutic, right, for kind of understanding things that are happening over our heads, in a sense. You know, there One of the important things I do, again, is kind of group different references to the divine council and how they're kind of connected with kind of cosmic affairs. This is, the classic ones that people reference are kind of election of a king or some appointment of a king, of course, and then, but also like a king is deposed. Um, there are also, maybe a king, there's a fascinating text in Mesopotamian context where, we have a really a perfect king in a sense. There's not a whole lot of, it was a Sumerian king. I can't, pull the name out right now, but he just dies unexpectedly. This is after he is, confirmed, and of course, there's all this kind of pageantry about how, the gods, are going to give him a long reign and he's blessed, but then he dies unexpectedly. So here also, like the gods, um, you know, s- right? We have to ask why, and it seems like the divine council had a role in this for some reason, and it's hard to say why. Um, but yeah, it's something happening over our heads. There's an important theory here that I can bring us back to Egyptian context specifically.
Please.
Um, that a very I think it's hard to it's hard to kind of confirm or deny, but it seems to make a lot of sense to me. A an important kind of theory about origins that has now cropped up in Mesopotamian context by Jakobson once more, uh, and now Aegean context as well, and Egyptian context is is that the kind of origin of the divine council is in these kind of formation of city states, more like almost sorry, I shouldn't say city states, but with city states maybe established already, a kind of coalition of city states with their own kind of tutelary deities. It's a coalition of city states maybe, and they come together as a kind of body, and each one of these cities come together in a kind of assembly, and they form some kind of unity. And that assembly then is then right representative, right, of all the powers of this political entity. So in Egyptian context, so back to nine, the nine, the Pesjet, the Egyptian Ennead. So in this theory, then it would go back probably to nine cities of some sort. Um, yeah, and in our boy Jakobson again, he kind of formulated this Kengir League, and going up into Aegean context, you have 12 gods. It would be there are 12, 12 cities kind of forming a divine assembly of sorts in those contexts. Um, and there's reason to think this is also a similar case happening in Israel at some point or another. So again, it does seem to be at a point in kind of human history where where this is kind of human society is reorganizing into these bigger bodies, and here religious beliefs are a way of kind of forming a certain amount of kind of cohesion and cooperation, probably because warfare is having a certain
Yeah.
amount of influence, and well, we need some allies. So we find ways to cooperate and understand this through a kind of metaphor of divinity that
Thank you.
works in one way or another. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I have one more question for you, and then we
Yes,
have a couple of audience questions, if
sure.
you're comfortable to take those.
Absolutely.
Um, what is next for you? You're obviously not finished with your PhD research. Where are you going from here?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really just am focused on writing right now, hoping to finish up writing very soon. And um, yeah, from there, we're in transition a little bit. We just moved recently, not too long ago now, from New Jersey to Oregon, where I'm from, and where my spouse is from. And yeah, we have some little ones, and so we've just been doing a lot, taking care of little ones right now.
It's always an exciting thing, moving with small children. And by exciting, I mean, oh dear God, no, please don't make me do it again.
And utter chaos, yes.
Absolutely chaos. We have a question from JS who says, what do you think of the work of Dr. Michael Heiser on the Divine Counsel of the Bible?
Oh yeah. So yeah, I have a handful of articles that I've read fairly closely by him. I'm not familiar with his new book, The Unseen Realm. Uh, I mean, I know about it. Uh, I have not read it closely, but he's got. I know of at least, I think, just 3 articles, I think, by him that I've read fairly closely. And yeah, I think um, his dissertation covers some great stuff. I think he tends to focus a little bit more on kind of toward the later stuff than I've looked at. He's got some more stuff kind of toward the Qumran era. But yeah, he's a great scholar. He's got some good stuff.
Thank you. And we have another from JS. I think he's asking, do Egyptian god triads play into the Aeneid idea? So Osiris, Isis, and Horus, and Mut Khonsu, do they come into what you're looking at all?
Yeah, so I think the thing I alluded to it a little bit ago is that, yeah, like the Heliopolitan Ennead, it's really not organized in triads. The things that are bodies that are called Enneads really aren't organized into threes. At least the Heliopolitan Ennead seems to be organized. Really, you have one deity, Atum, that kind of stands outside of it, and he kind of generates the other gods like asexually, kind of within himself through a combination of like masturbating and spitting. And then these pairs emerge from it. It's 4 pairs then making, 8. So yeah, it's just it's not um, it doesn't triads doesn't quite work there. I mean, returning though to threes, I want to answer some more questions, but threes does pop up. And I suspect though that it comes from kind of the lunar calendar. So this is a fascinating bit right here that I'll try and give really quickly. A fascinating bit here is, yeah, the kind of ideal year, I think, throughout, certainly in the area that I've studied most closely, I suspect it's the case also for Egyptian context, is the lunar calendar is very important. So something like every 29 and a half days or something, I don't know. Basically, there's a kind of an ideal year that's basically revolves around the number 30 in a sense. So I suspect 30 comes into play there. And what happens on the at the time of like the new moon is there's a every 30 days or so, the kind of setting of the sun kind of corresponds to the setting of the moon. And we can see this, especially in Mesopotamian contexts, these kind of divinatory contexts. Certainly, Shamash and Adad, the sun god, and I don't know, we'll say the storm god. They play very important, a very important role in divination, but also the moon god, and in some cases, even the moon god is even chief in some of these meetings. But there's good reason to think there's kind of some mythopoeic energy or imagery happening here when all these lunar bodies kind of go down together behind the western horizon every 30 days or so. And then we understand this as basically a meeting of this kind of some astrological kind of mythopoeic energy or imagery happening here, where all these astral bodies, oh, and I should say, at the same time, you also have Venus setting at the same time here. So roughly every 30 days, all these astral bodies just descend behind the western horizon at the same time, and it's imagined as an assembly of the gods, I think. And and the Egyptian contexts are awesome for this because the Pesjet is written with a little moon sign, which is
Perfect.
just great.
That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
We've had a couple more questions come in. Sebastian says, were any of these ancient Near Eastern divine councils located in specific places in the same way that the Hellenic pantheon is associated with Mount Olympus?
Yes, absolutely. They're all very kind of space and place-based phenomena. So yeah, this is Egyptian context. The Heliopolitan Ennead is, this is based in Heliopolis, which is Egyptian owned. In Israelite context, it's Mount Zion, basically, which is equated with Mount Safon in Psalm 50 something, and Mount Safon in Ugaritic is the Mount of the Divine Council. And it's where Baal lives. Well, so yeah, at least sometimes it's the meeting where the Divine Council meets. Yeah, the question mentions Olympus, but these are absolutely place-based phenomena. In Mesopotamian contexts, it meets in the Kiur temple. It moves depending on where the capital is in Mesopotamia. Yeah, but definitely in Babylon. Well, what's the temple there? The main one,
Temple
anyways.
names are not my strong point, I have to admit.
Yeah. It'll
It'll come.
It'll come. Yeah.
Thank you. Scott asks, are you saying that religion made civilization successful at war and increasing warfare made religion a stronger influence in a kind of codependent relationship?
Yeah, I mean they're definitely like kind of influencing each other, but this is absolutely a kind of dominant, or this is a well established um, kind of mode of interrogating religion. It's just how religion and religious thought kind of how it contributes or how it facilitates, yeah, just social relationships, pro-social, yeah, cooperation between groups. Yeah, if you know that someone ascribes to a similar kind of worldview, and this is again this is a very worldview based kind of theology we're talking about. If you know someone has the same kind of worldview as you, then and you can kind of trust this person in a sense, because like we all know, like, okay, the gods, the divine council have decreed such and such. Okay, that means my behavior uh must, follow certain,
Mm,
you know has certain consequences for my behavior, right, and someone else's behavior,
thank
and I
you.
can then trust them. Yeah.
Perfect. We have one final question, and then we will be ending this interview for the day. Raphael says, in Egypt, did any historical event cause a big shift in a long-established pantheon and council? He says Akhenaten doesn't count.
Yeah, this is, I mean, when we're talking about things like, millennia of history, then absolutely, right? Like, it's, we're talking here, when I'm talking, I'm very much generalizing certain things, but yeah, there's definitely a certain amount of diversity, um, when we're talking about especially Egyptian divinity, right? This is, um, yeah, there there are different moves, right, that happen where maybe one group starts to kind of establish their own deity in one way or another, such that that deity kind of transcends the rest of the pantheon. And uh, often this kind of corresponds with kind of social factors. Um, that being so, yes, there's certainly a certain amount of diversity and change that goes into this, and it's difficult to talk about. Just one single fixed divine council or divine assembly. Certainly does shift. Yeah, members shift, I think, but it's definitely the metaphor is consistent, even if the kind of particulars of it move.
Mm.
The metaphor persists as
I,
the city.
I can't speak to the Egyptian examples, but I think that for me the clearest thing in Mesopotamia is when you look at the Enuma Elish and the rise of Marduk as like king of the gods. He doesn't do away with the divine council. He's just elevated to the top of it,
Yeah. Yep.
and that
Exactly.
corresponds with Babylon's then
Yep.
political rise.
Yep. Yep.
So we have no more questions. Ransom, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
It's been fascinating hearing about your research. The divine council is something that kind of pops up regularly. It's not something I know an awful lot about, so this has been really wonderful.
Well, thanks for your just lovely interview.
Oh wow, thank you. Good luck with the rest of your research. If you ever want to come back and talk to us some more, we'd be delighted to have you.
Absolutely.
Audience, thank you all for joining me. If you're not familiar with HAPS, then the web address is scrolling on the bottom of the screen. It's a nonprofit that I run designed to give students some much needed funds for when they are researching. We are about to start a second interview, and I'm putting the link in the chat. If you are interested in joining, please do come along. It'll be very interesting. It's about boats in the Or3 period. Excuse me. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?